Hello and welcome back to the When You're Podcast, the podcast for when you're doing anything. Today we're talking about when you're searching for a great book. Guys, you ever go to the bookstore and you know what you think you want, but you don't know if it's gonna be exactly what you need it to be? It's like going to the store to find a book is one thing. It's like, maybe I'll go in here and I'll find a book that I like, or I'll see something cool and I'll take it home with me. I'll buy it. I'll purchase this book. You know what I mean? You go into the bookstore, you look for a book, that's great. But I'm talking about when you're searching for a great book, like that book that's just going to make you want to reread it over and over and over again. And I think that um maybe my expectations I think my expectations for books are relatively fine. I don't think I have high expectations for books. I don't particularly read a whole lot of books. I mean, I read, but like mostly on my phone or, articles and whatnot, right? Memes and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? And for the most part, they're like video essays and, breakdowns of videos of like, uh, certain things that are just like a lot more informative, or I guess I should say they explain it a lot easier, a lot faster than, me having an actual book of it. Not that there's anything wrong with reading the book, or like maybe I should, but long story short, what I'm talking about here is you go to a bookstore, you have like some free time, or, what I mean, you're kind of like, I'm interested in seeing what else, what other kind of things are out there, what other stories I think is the better word. What are the kind of stories exist? You know what I mean? Maybe you're bored of the TV show you keep on watching, or the movies, or you know what I mean? Or you're waiting. I feel like a lot of the game now is like, oh man, I have to wait for the movie to come out, or the next season of the TV show. I have to wait for it to come out, and then once it comes out, uh I have to wait again, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like it's a waiting game, or it's like a bored kind of a feeling. So you're like, I'm interested in other stories. Let me see what else is out there. Anyways, I'm talking about that great book. And I think we all have had an experience with reading or with books that kind of it's part of our, hopefully, it's a part of our education system, and sometimes we feel we I don't want to say gravitate. What's the right word? Our interaction with these books kind of shape the way that we feel about, I don't know, school or academics, or maybe books in general. You know what I mean? So for me, there are a few books that I feel that are great, and that growing up reading them, or like having them involved in the classroom, like we would read it in class together, and I felt like what's the right word? They would really add, uh I felt like the experience was, you know what the right word is? I think it's nostalgia playing a part into it, but I feel like there's a sort of attachment to these books once we are at that young age, and we're just like starting to develop like understanding themes, and, understanding like the deeper context and characterization and plot summary, and we start learning like, okay, what's the inciting incident, what's this, what's that, how does this, that all the kind of process of learning, storytelling, and how writers, or what's it called, these authors would design their books. And I felt like a big part of it came from, I guess, my connection with them was a lot more based on like the movies that I would watch. Like I loved going to the movies as a kid, you know what I mean? And and I would go to school and we would read this book, and then there would be a movie that come out from it. So I was like, oh snap, like you read the book and then you watch the movie, and it's kind of like if you make a good enough book, you make a really great movie, and it's like it's all connected, you know what I mean? I was like, I thought that was a really cool thing. So when reading these books as a kid, it kind of like all connected and created like this nostalgic experience for me, or this childhood educational experience that I felt was very positive, and that I enjoyed a lot. But I can only say that for a few books. There were some kind of like books, mostly a lot of the things we would read in class would be like, I don't know, worksheets or like articles from like whatever, or maybe textbooks. And those were mostly informative. They were mostly historical, I would say. And they kind of got boring after a while. I'm talking about like the real. So for me, when I mean real, I'm talking about like a real, like, book from like a big author. Like, I remember when my class and we read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. And I thought that was an amazing book. And I don't recall if the movie had already come out yet, or if it was in that era where it was like the first movie had come out and they didn't really. I mean, it was good, but they didn't really stick the landing. So I'm trying to remember it exactly for what it was. But I know for a fact that I made the connection between the book and the movie. I was like, yeah, it's a great book. Or, the book, it becomes a big movie. So it has to be an amazing book, right? So I kind of had that correlation. All to connect to like when you're searching for a great book. But anyways, there's that book was really good. I also really, I say this a million times, but one of the best book experiences I ever had was reading The Outsiders. And I'm talking about it from like a school perspective. It's like one of those books where we used to read it in class, like not popcorn read or anything. It was like we would listen to it with an audiobook. And I remember sitting down in that class. And the book's not that long, but I remember very distinctly we would be on like, what was it? Like we would get to like chapter 4 or 5 or whatever, like pretty early on in the book. And I would go home and I would read ahead of the book just so I know what happens in the book. And then look at everybody else's faces when we get to like a new part of the chapter that, you know what I mean? Like I would listen to the audio recording and I would read along with everybody in class, but I would secretly, like when a good part's coming up, like you would skim down a little bit. I'd be like, oh yeah, that wait till they see this part with such and such and whoever, like that was a fun experience for me. But the book was so good that like I wanted to do those things. Like I wanted to go home and read it on my own just because the book was that good. And I feel like I haven't found another book that has like intrigued me in that same way. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. Like that's what I'm searching for. I'm searching for that great book. I'm searching for that really perfect, the one that's like I have to read what happens next. You know what I mean? I have to see how this unfolds, There's another book that I really enjoyed, not for class. I think I bought it at the Scholastic Book Fair. It was a book with like a action figure. I think I talked about this before, but it was called Powerless by, I forget if it's Matthew Cody or Cody Matthew. It's always confusing when they have two first names as like the first and last name, because it's like I don't remember which is which, but that was the name of the book. It was called Powerless. And I would read that, and I read that book I think I read it like twice, but in reading it, I would like go back and reread the chapter and figure out like parts that I liked and that I didn't like. But anyways, that book was really good, but that was one of the ones I read on my own. That was like solo. And the reason I liked the book was because it had superhero themes in it, or like superpowers. But anyways, I all of that is to say that like each one is like a different experience that I had with like a great book, and that's kind of like where my expectations are. You know what I mean? And I don't think, and I think nostalgia plays a part into it. It's like you're never gonna find something like that again. You know what I mean? But what you can find is something that kind of piques your interest now and makes you want to, reread it over and over and over again, or certain moments of parts. And there was even a book when I was in elementary school. We got to go to the library and they were like, hey, you can pick out any book that you want and you can rent it and take it home and read it for, your, I think they did like reading timesheets or something. It was like you're supposed to sit down and read for, I don't know, an hour a day or something like that at home as like homework or whatever. I don't know. But it was like you can rent out one of these books and then check it back in or whatever. And I remember I read this book with like a snail on the front. I think I talked about this. Man, I feel like I'm very vaguely remember talking about this, but it was a book of a snail and an ant, and it was by the author Avi, A-V-I. I don't know if I'm saying it right, Avi, A-V, but it was this book called The End of the Beginning, or The Beginning of the End of the Beginning, or something like that. It was something about the end of the beginning. And I read that book, and the confusion it gave me as a kid, but the intriguing thing about it was that like it was two very different animals, insects, sort of species. There were two different species of like, it was a snail and an ant, and I was like, they are under no obligation to like hang out with each other, but they do it because, they're friends or whatever. And I was just kind of like, I don't know why I found that so interesting. I just really enjoyed that. And I also thought that the snail going slowly and maybe the ant being really fast, you know what I mean, would be an interesting dynamic. But another great book experience that I had. But I think that the other day, when I went to the bookstore the other day, I went to everybody's favorite bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and there was kind of in the back of my mind, I was like, I know exactly what kind of book I want to get, or like that I'm looking for. Let me see if I can go find it. So initially, I wanted like a mystery book. I wanted some sort of like mystery, just something that would make it like a page turner, like I don't know, anything, a detective book, a whodunit murder mystery kind of book, a suspenseful thriller kind of book, where it's like every page you're trying to like figure out like, oh, it's not this person, or is it this character, or you get what I'm saying, right? It's like just one of those books where it's like they make you turn the page because you're trying to figure it out. Like you solve it as you read along, and then you don't figure it out until whenever, you know what I mean? Whereas like I think when I watch a movie, you already kind of have in the back of your mind, it's like, yeah, that person did it, or you already know. But as you're reading it, maybe it's the same thing when you're reading it. You have ideas of who did it, and you kind of think to yourself, well, this person obviously did it because of blank, blank, and blank. But I don't know, maybe the difference there is crazy. But I went in there looking for a mystery novel with like a smart detective and fast-paced. That's what I was. It's like just a fast-paced, page-turning mystery book. You know what I mean? With good kind of like interactions and dialogue, and the characters and the way that everybody is like integrated and about it, but they're kind of different. You know what I mean? So that was one. I think the other book, or I'm going to say the other book, I think books that interest me a lot more these days are Well, how about I stick with the books that I usually went for? So the books that I would usually go for were fiction books. They were sci-fi, science fiction books. They would be fantasy books, and I liked these books because they were so removed from the real world or from what like I kind of have seen on screen or on the on like movies and TV shows. Like they don't have a TV show about let's just say that they don't have like a very impressive TV show about mermaids, right? So then I find this book about mermaids and like a prince and all this other stuff, right? I mean, that sounds very basic. I'm just trying to give an example. Obviously, there are mermaid TV shows. You know what I mean? I know H2O, right? I know that one. But I'm talking specifically like there's no mermaid TV show that's like popping right now. You know what I mean? And I could rewatch H2O, but let me see if I can find something else. You know what I mean? Anyways, back to my point. Those were the kind of books I was interested in. The science fiction books, where it's like a dystopian society that's completely removed from our world. And I kind of fell out of love with it, like in high school when they made me read 1984. And that's a good book, but I was just like, I didn't like the class. I didn't like the structure of it, where it's like I had to do this vocabulary quiz with it, and like I just feel like I didn't really get a whole lot out of that book in the same way that I used to in like middle school or in elementary school. But maybe that was on me. But those were the kind of books I was looking for when I was in middle school. It was like dystopian society, I almost malfunction there. A robotic world where it's like technology is taking over and there's robots everywhere, or robots are looking for human rights or like equal rights or civil rights or whatever. You know what I mean? They feel like they're people too. They're not machines. They have a mind and they're capable, and AI, and they're so functioning, and they pretend to be human so that way they don't get in trouble. You know what I mean? I like those. Those were the kind of books I was looking for. And then I thought historical fictions were top tier, and they still are top tier, but I like them more. I think the best example of a historical fiction movie is the Titanic. It's like a romance mixed with drama and has just like a little bit of everything in there, you know what I mean? But it's fiction. It's not Jack and Rose aren't real people. It's just that we put them into the historical time setting of the Titanic, and then everything, you know what I mean? And then we make drama happen, we make the whole thing take place. You know what I'm saying? And then they do this every so often with different movies, but I really enjoy those historical fiction type of movies or things. So when I read this book, read is the wrong word. When I found this book that was like based in World War II, and it was like this kid who was like almost old enough to go to war, but he was stuck at home, you know what I mean? He's too young to enlist or whatever. So it just kind of follows his life and like navigating stuff. I like those kinds of stories. So I thought historical fiction, I mean, romance is also very, very nice. I'm not talking about like the very slutty ones where it's like, and then he removed my blouse. You know what I mean? It's nothing like that heavy one. But I mean like the cutesy teen romance books. I felt like those were like stories that I could get on board with, where it's like, oh, I hate him, and then all of a sudden it's like, then he walked over towards me, and it felt like 100 doves floated off into the wind, and I could see in the sunshine on my face, felt the sunshine just lit up the room, and it made me feel 1,000 kisses of joy or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, and those kinds of lovey-dovey books are more so, I guess, my speed, or something that like I'm more interested in, because whenever I watch like a movie where they make like the romance or the love interest like really quick, like I was thinking about it from like in action movies where it's like they force you to pretend or believe that this guy, obviously they make it like a good looking guy and this beautiful woman, it's like instant attraction, and then oh my gosh, she saves her life, and then she kisses him, and now they're a couple, and then they're perfect together. I just like, I it's fine for the movie, but it's like not one of my, not something that interests me, because I'm like they're developing too fast. I like a relationship, or I want to read something or find something where it's like they let it cook a little bit. You know what I mean? That's why I kind of like the TV show Bridgerton, where it's they let it cook for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not all. I mean, there is sex in there, but it's not all. You know what I mean? It's a passion that comes after a nice buildup, and I like that buildup. I like that kind of romantic tension between two people. So anyways, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So another, I think I said the fantasy novels were also something that I was more interested in at the time. So the, fantasy novels about like, I'm not saying like Twilight or anything like vampires and werewolves, but give me a book like Harry Potter. You know what I mean? I like those books. I like those movies. You know what I'm saying? How about a book about God? Maybe Lord of the Rings, or what about like flying dragons and whatnot? You know what I'm saying? Like those kinds of movies, those kind of fantasy novels, I was a lot more interested in. So when I went into the bookstore, and I immediately went to look for mystery novels, but I was also in the back of my head like, don't, let's see if we can find something that we also like, finding things that I could really enjoy. Anyways, and while I was looking for mystery books, I was kind of like, why am I so, as I gotten older, I've kind of started leaning a little off of the fiction and more towards the, yeah, I would say I would lean more towards nonfiction now. Not always. I mean, sort of, not really, but I would lean more towards the nonfiction because they have true crime books. And the true crime books I expect to be a lot more in depth. I expect them to be something that I could go home and look up later and be like, that's interesting. Let me see how they're, how it all unravels or how it impacts everything. You know what I'm saying? Because like obviously I can't keep up with all of the true crime that goes on in the world. I mean, I could, I listen to podcasts and I could like look on the news every day, but I don't. So finding a true crime book was definitely like on the list. It's like if I can't find a mystery book, maybe there's a true crime book about something that's interesting or something like that goes a little in depth into like an investigation or whatever, and I also tend to like I think autobiographies are pretty underrated because they come from the person. So it feels a lot more real. It feels like a lot more like they're telling it to me, obviously through the pages. They're kind of just telling me, they're like, when I went to Cambridge or when I went to school or when I felt, you know what I mean? They tell you how they really felt. Whereas biographies, they're good and they kind of give you some perspective, but they come from another you know what I mean? He did this or she went and did this and she kind of felt this way as told by her friend or an activist that we met up and interviewed and we got to get a little bit more in depth on, or so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? Like it's good work, but it's not, I guess, as directly personal or as fascinating as somebody who, you know what I mean? It's like somebody who writes a diary or a journal, and you get to like look at their own private thoughts or get some insight into like everything that they've been through, you know? But anyways, I said history books. History books are quite good. I think if you're looking at the broad range of history, like when I would get history textbooks in school, they were so quick, or they expanded on big ideas in like a few pages, you know what I mean? Whereas a single book could focus on literally one battle, and they could tell you like military strategy, where the general grew up, or how they learned this kind of warfare, the guns they used, the amount of men that they had, where they came from, how they enlisted, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's a lot more in depth, or like what they were battling for. You know what I mean? They were battling for the land, or they were battling for, you know what I'm saying, like to gain the next step forward or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And then the other side retreated, so they were losing, and it kind of paints a picture of a small battle, but over a larger picture of a war. So I like that. You know, I think that aspect is really cool. But again, it's just kind of to read like I couldn't read per se. I couldn't read a whole book about World War II, right? There's too much information. There's too much going on. But if you give me a book about, you know, maybe kind of like a quick, faster paced book about the start of World War II, or like, you know what I mean? Like you give me like the first year of World War II, you break down the battles and sequence and like how the world responded to it. Like I feel like I could digest that a lot easier than the full book itself. You know what I mean? Because there would be things I'm not interested for sure, but I feel like it would be more palatable or a lot easier to eat than like a whole gigantic, you know what I mean, like big book about World War II. So anyways, those books are a lot more interesting to me now because I find that kind of history a little fascinating, but I also find them pretty sad because it's like, man, you know, it's just they're just pages on a book now. You know what I mean? They don't get to, you know, these soldiers or these people or the people who died for what we're living through right now is kind of like, man, now they're just ink on a piece of paper. You know what I mean? I feel like it's very telling of like, you know what I mean? I don't. So I don't like to think about it or to like put it in perspective that way, but when I do, it's just kind of like, darn, you know. But other books, nonfiction books, nature books. Nature books are so underrated. And nature books are so underrated because I could easily go on my phone or on Netflix or Hulu or any of the big streaming services, and you can find nature documentaries, and they're very informative, and they tell a story so vividly with the camera. You know what I mean? It looks beautiful. Great work that they do. No denying that. But the book, I feel like nature books with pictures, you know, maybe they throw in pictures in there. I don't really know. But they give you a lot more, maybe a little more history. Maybe they give you just like a little bit more like deep information on certain things that we probably, you know, that can't be displayed properly maybe in a documentary. Not that they can't be displayed properly. What's the right word? I want to say there are certain things that the book can do that the documentary alone isn't sufficient enough in. Like if the documentary talks about um if they talk about like the forest, they kind of like gloss over a subject or two, or they, obviously they show it to you, but they can't give you the full look at it because the jungle is very dangerous or the forest is very, wild and you could get it hurt over there. Whereas the book can go maybe a little bit more in depth and give you a little bit more of like, this is what you really want to know about. They kind of give you a little bit more juice, I should say. So yeah, something that like that is very informative. So anyways, when you're searching for a great book, sometimes the search is more fun than the actual book. Like when I was in Barnes and Noble, or I guess if you go to any bookstore, it's kind of nice to just look through and try to find something that speaks to you, something that like appeals to your sense of intelligence. You know what I mean? What piques your interest? And it's kind of fun to like look at different books. Sometimes they have something you'd like, they have something that you're like, I don't know, maybe, right? That's kind of how I felt. I just enjoyed looking through the books, feeling the books, holding the books in my hand and kind of skimming through them to get a good sense of like, what is it about this book? Or is there something in this book that I might like? You know what I mean? Maybe reading a page or two or the synopsis or seeing the like, this isn't really for me. Let me put this back. Or seeing it and being like, this could be something I would like, but maybe another time or another day. You know what I mean? Sometimes looking for it is a lot more fun. Like being in the store is the best because you get the whole experience. You know what I mean? You get the full, like, all of the books around you. And this is a book that's like on the shelf and that's calling your name. And it's just like, you know what I mean? It's perfect for you. Or, I guess you could online shop for books. I guess that's a fair way. But then you don't get the full experience of the book. I feel like you go to the store, you find the book, and then you pick up the book and you start like, you have the book physically in your hand. I think I like that a lot more. But online shopping is just as well, especially if you know the book that you're going for or the kind of thing that you're looking for. I don't know. I just feel like I enjoy big libraries or big places with books and where everybody kind of agrees that like, we're not going to go crazy in here, so to speak. Like, we're all here to find something. We just don't know where it is or what's going on. You know what I'm saying? I kind of like those places. You know what? You know why I like Barnes & Nobles? It reminds me of like the Scholastic Book Fair. Because they have all the books set up there and they're just like, this one's 50% off sale or buy one, get one free. Or they'll do like deals or they'll put like fan favorite books out there. Or they'll have mangas all over the, on the shelves. And they'll be like, these are great books for you. They'll put it at the front and then you kind of go find your own thing. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It's very nice. But anyways, I get to the store and I find a couple of great books that I really enjoyed. I'm not going to say the name of the books, but they were books that I thought that if I pick them up, I'm going to see all the way through. You know what I mean? You go to the store and you find a book or two, and you're like, they're good, they're okay. I don't know, they're not really hitting for me, or they're not. There's no energy coming off of this book. I'm just gonna stick to this book or whatever. You know what I mean? You want to find something that once you get started with it, you know for a fact that like I'm sticking with it all the way through the end. And those are the books I found. But what's interesting is that now that I have these books, I can certainly pick them up and read them. There's no question about that. But if I want to make the experience good, if I want to make these great books, you know, give me a great experience with them, I think what I need to do is connect them with an audiobook. And the audiobook, I think I'm more of an auditory learner. Like you could tell me something and I'll remember it, or I'll you could tell me something and I'll keep it in my brain for a while. You know what I mean? That's why I like podcasts, or why I like true crime podcasts, is because once I hear the story, I don't need to like revisit it or per se recapture it. This is why I'm so good at remembering like movie lines or one-liners or maybe music lyrics, which I guess all people are, you know, good at remembering lyrics. But long story short, I feel like the audiobook connected with the books I got might help me, you know what I mean, get that experience that I had when I was younger, when I was reading like Percy Jackson or The Outsiders. You know what I mean? You kind of read along with it and it helps stay with me a little bit longer, if that makes sense. And also audiobooks are pretty neat. You know, they go a long way in entertaining your mind or giving you stories in the same way that a podcast would, but instead of listening to some, you know, influencer or some, you know, I can't listen to true crime podcasts forever. So instead of listening to that, I should listen to maybe an audiobook on a long car drive. You know, I'm driving 3 hours to this place. Let me put on an audiobook and listen to this story. Or I want to go out for long walks, or I'm going for a hike and I have my phone with me. Instead of listening to music, maybe I should listen to an audiobook and try to, you know, hear the story and have some fun with it, you know? So, at the end of the day, when you're searching for a great book, I think you have to find, well, it's obvious, find something that speaks to you, but I'm talking about like something that you know from the moment you pick it up, that no matter what, you're going to read it all the way through. Because otherwise I feel like you're not getting your, I guess maybe your money's worth, or, you know, you're not getting as much out of it as you put into it. You know what I mean? So make sure it's something you're going to put your energy into, something you're going to be like, okay, I'm all about this. You know, I'm all about this character, whether or not it's good or bad. I'm going to put energy into this. I'm going to put time and my own investment into this book, into these pages, into this story. And I'm going to make sure that it's something that I want, you know? So those kind of books, I feel like, are the ones you should really, really strive for. And that comes from any number of things. What kind of genre do you like? You know, knowing yourself very, very well will help you find the best book for you. So anyways, yeah, when you're searching for a great book, look deep within yourself and say to yourself, I like this book. I am this type of person. I deserve this kind of book. Let me find it today. And then you say that, you go into the bookstore, and then you find a book. Simple as that. So anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for listening. Go get a book, a brand new book today, and read it. Make sure you read it. Anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.